Next on the show, we have an award-winning author, essayist, and editor. Brian Doyle's work can be found in the Atlantic Monthly, Harper's, and the San Francisco Chronicle, among others. He is the author of 11 books, including his first novel, Mink River, and his most recent book of short stories called Bin Laden's Bald Spot, which the Daily Beast called one of the best debuts of the fall. According to the Beast, he is a writer to be ignored at your own peril. So we won't. Please welcome Brian Doyle to Livewire.
Good evening to all the children out there. I just committed a novel, as a friend of mine says, like an inky sin. And there's a piece in it that I love to read, because to me it's more than a list of ingredients. It becomes sort of a chant or a litany or a prayer. So in the scene, there's an old man who's got about 3 days left to go. He's going to die, and he knows it, everybody knows it. And a young guy says to him, "Can I ask you a question? Can I ask you a blunt question? What mattered? What mattered in your life?" And the old man says, "Hawks huddled disgruntled against hissing snow, wrens in winter thickets, swallows carving and swimming and slicing fat grinning summer air, frozen dew outlining every single blade of grass, salmonberries, blackberries, thimbleberries, raspberries, cloudberries, snowberries. My children learning to read, the sinuous liquid flow of rivers and minks and cats, fresh bread with way too much butter, my children's hands when they cut my ancient grizzled face in their hands, exuberance and ebullience, tears of sorrow which are the salt seas of the heart. Sleep in every form from doze to bone weary, the shivering ache of a saxophone and the yearning of an oboe, folding laundry hot from the dryer, cobblers and tailors, spotless kitchen floors, the way horses smell in spring, postcards in which the sender has written so much that he or she can barely squeeze in a signature. Opera on the radio, toothbrushes, the postman's grin, the green sifting powdery snow of cedar pollen on the porch every year, the way herons labor through the sky with such vast elderly dignity. People who care about hubcaps, the cheerful ears of dogs, all photographs of every sort, tip jars, wine glasses, the way barbers sweep up circles of hair after haircuts, handkerchiefs, libraries, poems read aloud by older poets on the radio. Fedora hats, excellent knives, the very idea of albatrosses and thesauruses, the tiny screws that hold spectacles together, book marginalia done with the lightest possible pencil as if the reader is whispering to the writer. People who kept dead languages alive, wooden rulers, fresh-mown lawns, first baseman's mitts, dish racks, the way my sons smell after their baths, the moons of Jupiter, all manner of boats, the fact that our species produced Edmund Burke, naps of every size, junior policeman badges, walruses, cassocks, surplices, the orphan caps of long-lost pens, welcome mats, ice cream trucks, all manner of bees, cabbages and kings, eulogy and elegy and puppetry, fingernail clippers, the rigging of sailing ships, ironing boards, hose and scythes, mysterious clips that girls wear in their hair, bodhisattvas and beauticians, porters and portmanteaus, camas and canvas, bass and bluefish, furriers and farriers, trout and grout, peach pies of every size, the sprawling porches of old hotels and the old men asprawl upon them, the snoring of children, the burble of owls, the sound of my daughter typing her papers for school in the other room, the sound of my sons wrangling and wrestling and howling and yowling, all sounds of whatever tone or tenor issue from my children in all other forms of coupled pain and joy, which is to say everything alive, which is to say all prayers, which is what I just did. Amen.
Brian Doyle. Welcome to the show, Brian.
I'm honored to be invited, Courtney. Thank you.
That excerpt was sort of stream of consciousness, and it was a good sampling of Mink River, because that runs through quite a bit of it, and it feels like you are just writing stream of consciousness. What kind of work does it take to make something appear to have just fallen out of the writer's head?
You cut a lot. You write in great bursts. You try to, in a funny way, you try not to think. You try to sort of feel with your heart and your fingers. You know what I mean? You have a story in mind, and more than ever before, I think I'm trying to let the story come out, and not be in control of it. And if you get into a great burst, it's really sweet. Sometimes you forget what time it is, and you're rolling, and the language is so playful, and like a river. It's really sweet. And then you cut like hell.
You just get out of its way, essentially.
Yeah, if you can. And a novel is very freeing. I'm an essayist by avocation, you know, and by real love. I love that phrase, the essayist. It's so lovely. But novelist doesn't fit. I'm not tall enough. You know?
I didn't realize there was a height requirement. You must be this tall to write. Before you wrote Mink River, as you said, you wrote a lot of essays, you wrote a lot of nonfiction books, including one about living through your son Liam's life-threatening heart condition. Did you feel like it was a relief to lose yourself in a fictional world for a while?
I was always terrified by fiction because I figured, why try to create a world when you can't grapple with this one very well? But it was actually really fun. Writing, you know, at the lowest level, it's catharsis. You get out. You have a window to let yourself out through. But then more and more, especially as I get older, I think, what an incredible way to connect. People read your work, and with the novel, I find people swim in it. People are savoring it. You know, it's really amazing to me. I've been visiting book clubs hand over fist, and I'm trying to learn to not say anything at a book club because people tell me what the book is all about, and I'm like, really?
It's
really,
interesting.
the crow is a sign of death. I didn't know that. Really, that's.
It seems like it would connect you with your audience more to have them read something intensely personal about you, as opposed to a fiction book. But you're saying that you feel more connected to them with them reading your novel.
Well, I'm struck by how people read fiction and nonfiction differently, I guess. You know, I've gotten hundreds and hundreds of letters from people for the essays I've written, which is really sweet and amazing. But most of those letters have that same flavor of, thank you, your arrow hit me. Or the ones that don't say, you're an idiot. It's, you know, hi, Mom. You know, those, you know, your piece hit me, thank you. And with the novel, it's more like, I lived in your town. I lived there for a while. And it really is very interesting to me, the different flavor. People, I think, swim in fiction more than they do in nonfiction. Nonfiction, we both have one foot on the planet.
Yeah.
Fiction, we're sailing off into other places altogether, which I think is sort of nutritious, it seems to me, to invent. What a great thing. What a great idea for us human beings.
Yeah, yeah. And I saw you speaking to a class, and you said something to them. You said, catching and telling stories is the single most important activity in your life. Do you think that that's good advice for writers or everyone?
Oh, I think for everybody. I think stories are food. I think if we don't have stories, we starve. I really do. This is the great cruelty of Alzheimer's, it seems to me, is that it sucks stories out and leaves you with nothing but a shell. What a hell that it would be to be healthy and have no stories. You know, if we had ale enough in time, I could go around the room and say, tell me stories, tell me. And every one of us has 100, 1,000 stories of power and hilarity and terrible mistakes. Yes, I'm talking to you, yes. I see you, yes.
Well, and you see yourself as a story collector. You know, you talk about just sort of always carrying around pens and pads, and as you talk to people, you kind of grab their stories. Do you ever feel like a sense of ownership, that they might have a sense of ownership to their own story?
Well, this immediately reminds me of a great line from my dad. My dad is 90, a wonderful writer. And my dad, last year at our family reunion, said, learning to ask a question and shut your pie hole is the secret to great literature and great seduction. And we're like, oh, we were all horrified, you know, and my mother's yelling from the other room, that's why we had 8 kids, for Christ's sake. You know, my brother Peter says to him, how come you didn't tell us when we were 20? And my father says, smoking a cigar, you would have misused the gift, he said.
So have you discovered that to be true?
I haven't found out yet. No, of course, all male writers, I think, start as a writer because you want to get the girls. That's why. Yeah. And then I think one of the great watersheds or one of the great shadow lines you go over as a writer is at some point you realize that it's not about you, that everybody else is more interesting, and it's really a bummer to be 29 and discover that it's not all about you, but it turns out it's a wonderfully freeing thing for a writer. When you stop thinking about yourself and start listening to everybody else, the world presents you with stories by the millions. It's incredible. Yeah. It's really moving.
Yeah. Well, and your latest book is actually a book, it's Bin Laden's Bald Spot, and it's a book of short stories, and there's actually quite a bit of humor in it. And
Shocked.
exactly. Well, and you use humor. Actually, you have a big reason to hate bin Laden, but your book begins with a humor piece about a barber who's dealing with bin Laden's bald spot. What does attacking him with humor do that straight up attacking him doesn't
Well,
do?
the backstory there is bin Laden murdered 3 of my friends on September 11th, and so for a long time I didn't know what to do. I was helpless and enraged and just really hammered by it, having grown up in New York. But then I finally realized the only way I can fight back is by a story, right? And I finally realized about bin Laden, he was one of those guys, and every guy here knows what I mean, one of those guys with a stuffed shirt. He's arrogant, and the only way you can get a guy like that is to laugh at him, right? It's the one thing he can't stand is to be laughed at. And so I wrote a whole series of pieces, many of them in the Oregonian, bless my soul. One of them about how he dyed his beard. Did you see that? The visionary prophet of the overthrow of the West wanted to look younger. What a butthead, But these pieces, I set out to. I realized, of course, they have to have haircuts in the cave, right? Who knew he was living in McMansion?
Right.
And I thought, well, what would the barber think? I mean, the barber has to go cut hair for what he calls basically a high school football team with major weaponry,
Mm-hmm.
And so he discovers that bin Laden has a bald spot the size of Iceland. And I used to send him pieces. I would publish them and send them to bin Laden. Osama bin Laden, Pakistan. I figured we'd get there,
Sure. Of course. Nice.
And the poor woman who married me kept saying, what if he issues a fatwa? I said, well, Mary, I don't think you issue fatwas against essayists. I don't think that's it.
There's also a story in this book about a cardinal in Boston who stood by while thousands of boys were taken advantage of by priests. And you are a Catholic, and you work for a Catholic university. What was at stake for you in writing a story like that?
I had my Catholic clothes on today, as you can see. At stake, for me, nothing really. I mean, that's Cardinal Bernard Law, formerly of Bernie Law. Good old Bernie was formerly the the Cardinal Archbishop of Boston. Bernie covered his ears as thousands of children were raped. Covered his ears and moved the people around. And one great thing about Catholicism, we've been here for a long time, and we're very upfront about saying, we punted, we screwed up, as my father says, again, smoking a cigar. The old days when we owned the world. It's like, but Dad, we screwed up. Yes, but we owned France back in those days. So you can be blunt about it. And one great thing about fiction is you can kind of take an idea out for a walk.
Mm-hmm.
What if actually, Bernie escaped and he's living in Italy today, but what if, the Boston cops went and found him and brought him back? What would happen? And basically that's where the story goes. What if is the great driving force, I think, for a lot of fiction.
It is,
So,
yeah. Yeah, and your father was a journalist. You wrote a book with your father.
Yeah.
What did you learn writing a book about faith with your dad?
Well, the one thing I learned, I vividly remember, we went on the funniest book tour, and I learned never go on a book tour with your father. He's smoking a cigar and asking people their names, and he had this huge pen, a pen the size of like a defense missile. And I said, Pop, what are you doing with that pen? And he goes, well, a woman might ask me to sign her bra. I was like, Dad.
On a book on faith. Yeah.
Dad,
a nun might ask me to sign her bra.
Dad, that's disturbing to hear. That explains my childhood to you. So.
Exactly. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. The book is Bin Laden's Bald Spot. The author is Brian Doyle. Thanks so much for joining us.